1. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Ughbog.
This is Merps, and I am so excited, dude. I am so excited. This is like the most excited I've been in quite a while. And
This
it
has
has
nothing to do with Hearthstone, does
at
it?
all to do with Hearthstone. And you know what? We'll try to tolerate this Lightforge, get through it somehow.
This is the most non-arena based Lightforge ever.
Because tomorrow Overwatch comes
also
out.
known as today, if you're listening to this actually in podcast form.
The game that we basically said we were never going to play.
Never. Repeatedly for like months.
Yeah. And now we can't get enough of it. And so, you know, we welcome our new Overwatch overlords, I guess. And we look forward to transitioning from the Lightforge into, I don't know, play
the
of the
Athena
game
Forge
podcast.
Oh, in terms of what you're trying to get instead of the Lightforge key?
Yeah.
Wow,
exactly.
wow. Well, you're not even trying to get higher ranks or wins. You're just trying to get the play of the game.
It's all about that Torbjorn play of the game after you died and your turret kills like 4 people.
Okay, less Overwatch talk, more Hearthstone Arena talk.
Aww.
We're still going to be primarily Hearthstone Arena streamers and content creators and all that. That's not going to change. Although we will take like at least half a week, if not a whole week off from it this next week. But before we do that, I was just on the Golden Wisp podcast with Alec and Hunter. If you've been following us for a long time, we were on there back in like September when we first made the Grinning Goats. And Alec is in New York, and we hang out every now and then, like in real life, which is weird to hang out with someone in the Hearthstone community in real life. Not because he's weird; he's a wonderful person, but it's just weird to have like the people kind of in different places of your life kind of come together. And that's really much more about like big picture arena stuff, like where is the arena going, what do you guys want to do, like that kind of stuff. So it's if you care about us and what we're doing in the future, or if you care about the state of the arena and what it is in the future, less about the particular meta or cards, it's a great interview. Their podcast is about like competitive Hearthstone. So I really like that I get invited on there every now and then, because it suggests vaguely that arena is still competitive in some way, or at least that there's some weird people out there that take it very seriously. But they mostly cover like tournaments and like, you know, constructed and things like that. But so if you're interested in both kinds of things, it's an excellent podcast. Golden Wisp. And also, because we have a jam-packed schedule, on Wednesday, I will be on Chanman's podcast, Value Town, which is also a primarily constructed podcast, but they have arena talks every like once or twice every meta. And this is the one for OG. I'll be on there with Chanman and Crip and Ratsma. So it'll be a really, really interesting talk again about like all the good cards, where the meta is. It's always nice to get all these people together. It'll just be good banter. So definitely check that out. That's going to be on Wednesday night recorded. I think it'll probably be released on Thursday or something. I'm not 100% sure. But that's the other podcast you should listen to as we send you along your way and we play Overwatch and never talk about the arena again.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while. I remember the last time us, like, you know, the Grin and Goat entity was on Value Town. That was myself and Crib with Chanman, and that was, I think, before LE came out.
Yeah, that was like right before LE. It was like the week before LE, because no one knew LE was coming out the week after that.
Right.
So it still kind of makes sense to talk about the meta that everybody thinks was going to stick around for at least another month.
That's when I remember I was like complaining about Keeper of Oldemon when we were you, me, and Crip were talking about how Ethereal Conjure would be insane, and people thought we were a little bit crazy. I was saying I love Pit Snake, like that. Those were, I remember it like it was yesterday, but man, a lot has changed in the arena since then.
Yeah, I don't remember it like it was yesterday. It seems like ancient history to me. All I know now are bog creepers. That's all that's in my head.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's going to be a fun when it comes to Hearthstone Arena. And before we leave you guys for Overwatch, by the way, like, huge exaggeration that we're leaving for Overwatch. We like to play it up because we kept saying we were never going to do Overwatch in particular, and we also never stream other games that we play, even though we sometimes do play other games. But this is going to be like also a long-term thing. Like, we'll be streaming Overwatch for like at least the next 3 months, probably the next half year, if not like just ever from now on. Because when we get into a game, you know, we get like really into it, so it'll be part of the rotation, like a small part of the rotation that we play as a change of pace from the deep analysis of the arena to a more like real-time thing with Overwatch. Still about strategy, still about teamwork. I mean, I guess the arena is not necessarily about teamwork, but when we do it, it's about teamwork. Anyway, that's that. And before we leave you, we put out a tier list update on Wednesday night, and that is kind of like, we always do a couple of tier list updates, and there are varying sizes. And the first tier list update was very small, and it was meant to be very small. It just did things like, oh, by the way, Darkshire Alchemist is really good. Like, you should definitely take that way above a Yeti. This one is more kind of in-depth, and normally this would have some very significant changes for some cards. But like, we kind of been saying this the whole time, and I think we still feel that way. I feel very confident that we got the meta right for OG. It was like an easy meta to predict. There were easy cards to pin down the values of, and from all the playing, it's all kind of there. Like, nothing is moving around that much, because I thought the initial evaluations were pretty good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, it was, you know, in your 13-part video series, you know, you sort of laid out like not only sort of direction for the specific classes, but just sort of general, like, sort of pacing for the arena, right?
Yeah.
And once you lock down the overall pacing for the arena, then your card value should follow, because you have so many comparisons. And really, what is a card value rather than the mathematical sort of value of it within the meta, right?
Absolutely.
So if you know the meta, you know the math, because you know all the other cards, you should be pretty accurate.
And so we did move some things around, and we also moved some things around that, like, we have a philosophy where we don't move old cards around when the new expansion comes out before we actually play in the meta. Like, we're pretty confident about where the meta's going, but it's a lot of work. And we kind of just don't want to do the work before it comes out when we're already evaluating like 100+ cards in a very short time span. And we're not, you know, like, we're pretty sure where the meta's headed, but, you know, you just have to wait a few days after the card dump to actually be in the meta. So a lot of the changes for this tier list update was based on that, right? Like, large removals got up to +6 points, hard removals, because things are bigger, the meta is slower, people are picking bigger things, even the ones that have existed before. We haven't moved, like, and you may be thinking, well, if that's true, then why didn't you also move large cards up? We haven't gotten there because, frankly, you don't need large cards to play in this meta. Like, we would cover this two podcasts ago, right? Like, the 3 ways to win is aggro control, snowball, and be bigger than your opponent, because you'll survive anyway, because no one's rushing you down, really. Only one of those requires big cards. So, on the other hand, all 3 of them will really benefit from large removals. So that's why we bump large removals up a lot. And you want to talk about the second big thing that we did, the infinite card advantage?
Infinite card advantage. Okay. Yeah. So basically, anything that can create, you know, this is going back to sort of when Inspire cards first came out, right? And like, the infinite card advantage idea first like came into view. But right now, it's kind of the same principle holds. If the game goes much longer and you know, everything's slowing down and it's about size and games are going more towards attrition, then having infinite card advantage or being able to just sort of outlast your opponent from like one engine is really good. Like, let's say Kodo Rider, right?
Yeah, a Kodo Rider puts things on the board. You don't have to do that, right? Like Manatite Totem.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Wins the game.
Yeah.
And the formula, we didn't give it to every engine. You know, like, people have noticed, like, Murloc Knight didn't get boosted again. We like the ones that have bigger impact. Like, Murloc Knight has a medium-sized impact whenever you use the hero power. The bonus kind of on average just keeps up with the tempo loss. So yes, you are still getting infinite card advantage, but you are sacrificing. Well, you don't really sacrifice tempo, but you're also not gaining extra tempo from it, and you're also not gaining that much card advantage. It's like that weird middle zone where you don't quite guarantee your victory.
Right. With Murloc Knight, on average, when you hero power, you're getting like a pretty good 2-drop, right? You're getting like a pretty good 2-drop, which is nice because you're playing an undersized 4 at first. So you hero power 2 times, and yeah, you're happy about it, but it's not something like the Coda Rider, in which every time you hero power, like a 3/5 is amazing.
Yeah.
Right. 3/5 is ridiculous. Mana Tide Totem, if you have like taunts, if you have, just like taunts and protections and spells out of your hand, I mean, that's infinite as well. So these are things that we consider like infinite card advantage. Obviously the card draw, but they have to be of some size. So it's not like Silverhand Regent.
Yeah, right. Like Silverhand Regent definitely would not count. Yeah, so that's infinite card advantage engines. We're just drawing some lines, and we may go back and then move some things up by 2 points as well from like Murloc Knights or whatever if we see it working a lot, or if we get it to work a lot. But right now, just the bigger stuff is really what we're concerned about. Okay. Taunt reconfiguration is something like we updated our formulas for taunts in recognition of the size of the card. It's complicated. It's just some taunts moved up or down 2 points. That's all you gotta know.
I don't even fully understand it. Like ADWCTA came to me. He was like, "I've done the math on this," and usually that's a pretty scary thing, But I do trust him with this. And then I'm like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah, because you have to adjust everything for the meta, right? Like, I've adjusted taunts for this new meta in terms of what we're seeing. So the formula changed a little. It's just very minor stuff. And then there's some cards that we, for one reason or the other, did not pan out the way we thought they were going to pan out. And they're not big movers. Like I said, we're pretty confident we got the meta right and all the cards right. But something like Blood to Ichor moved it down 4 points. We had it really high, and it just was the case that dealing 1 damage without killing a minion is much less useful than dealing the damage to kill a minion the way like Mortal Coil works than I was giving it credit for. And it's a mix of that and that card advantage, even like Warlock card advantage, is just more useful now when you compare it to a 2/2 body, which in the late game is really not all that useful at all, right? In the late game, Blood to Ichor at best deals 3 damage, which is still a very tiny card.
Right. I mean, it has initiative. It's a fantastic tempo card, right? But now it's also a little bit dangerous because warriors have offering bonus rates to all 3 sort of small-ish tempo cards, right? N'Zoth's First Mate, amazing tempo card. Blood to Ichor, really great. But Ravaging Ghoul is like the biggest one, right?
We were like, I keep wanting to move that card up, and like Twilight Flamecaller, we did move up. I think we moved it up, maybe by like 2 points, because it was already so high, and we kept wanting to be like, but it's really good, and then we're like, wow, we're already rating it like an 80. I don't know how much higher it's gonna go, but it's the same deal. We keep trying to move these cards up, and we get to the point where we're like, okay, but it's kind of, we already hit that point. Like, we thought it was gonna be really good, and it is really good, so we want to move it up, but we can't push it up even more, or else it starts being like, would you take this or a fireball? No, you'd still take a fireball. So some of these cards are reaching that cap. A card that, on the other hand, that like didn't work out as well as we thought it was going to work out is South Sea Squidface. By the stats, it's incredible, right? It should be like 80, 90, right? Like it's Arathi Weaponsmith levels of good.
It should be, but then as we got to playing with it, and we've played quite a lot of
even before we played with it, right? Like we never rated it 80 or 90.
That's true.
We started out and we were like, this card's going to be so awkward. Like you have to hero power. If you hero power, you want to ping something, and then you're kind of at the point where you only get half of the bonus, which is still good, but then it has to die. Your opponent may not kill it. You may not be able to kill it off. You have to set it up again. Like all sorts of weird considerations, and it's the rogue, right? By the time you get to turn 4, and it's not even a turn 4 play a lot of times, oftentimes, in order to set up the dagger, if you want that value, it's going to be later than that. And so at that point, how much is the dagger worth, right? Like, your attacks as the rogue are limited by your health. So it's always worth more earlier than later, plus the awkwardness, plus all that. We started it out at, God, what did we start it out at? Like a 60? Like something that was already, I think, like very low.
Yeah,
compared to like its actual thing.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the score, but it's almost jarring in a way. If you look at the score now, you're like, it has to be worth more than that. But in practice,
it was at a 60. Now it's at a 56.
Yeah, it's just so hard to find a time in which you can use it effectively, right? And then at those times where you can use it effectively, I'm like, I'd rather just have a better minion at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just have a better minion, and sort of like it goes back to one of the tenets of Hearthstone, I think, where if you have a big advantage, but you offer your opponent the ability to sort of
control
have a
things.
choice of when for you to activate it, that's a little bit dangerous, right? That's always a little bit dangerous, and that's why like initiative has always been so valuable. And this, like some sort of weird weapon setup, like even
because it's a weapon, it's not initiative. You don't get initiative from this.
Yeah,
like your opponent triggers it, you get a weapon that you use on your next turn, or you have to wait a turn before you get the weapon on the turn. Either way, your opponent's prepared for it.
Yeah, and if it causes you to play mana inefficient as well as a rogue, I mean, that just helps the other person out significantly. So
yeah, the whole like dagger up and do nothing, not a very good plan when you're on turn 7. And then you get your deadly poison essentially for free. You still got to use it, and in the meantime you've anti-tempoed yourself, so you're taking some face damage or something. It's awkward, and we played a lot of rogue. Like it's awkward.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so one more thing is the Addled Grizzly. I don't know how many people care about that card, but based on the comments, a lot of people actually care about this card. So good for, like, we rated it very low. It's a 3-mana 2/2, if you don't know, and it's a beast, and every time you play a minion, that minion gets +1/+1. So it's a 3-mana late game card that doesn't scale as well as anywhere near as well as Questing Adventure. Because what you want to do with Questing Adventure is not to play with a bunch of minions, but to play with some removals so you ensure that it stays on the board and it can buff more things. And as it buffs more and more things, it gets more health, which means it stays alive, and then it can get more big. Like, you don't get any of that with the Addled Grizzly.
No,
it's like such a crappy version. But we rated it like significantly worse than like an Ironforge Rifleman.
It was really low, and part of the reason why it's not terrible, or where the score was previously, is now what happens is people are playing a lot more off the board, right? Whether by choice or just by I don't have I just don't have the cards necessary. Like the Dangushin has gotten to the point where I'm forced to play off the board, and it's not as punishing to play off the board as well, because like snowball mechanisms by your opponent are also less and less, right?
Yep.
So in this sort of situation, Addled Grizzly isn't that bad, because it could be 2 turns before your opponent finds a way finally to get rid of it.
Yep, I've seen it last on the board against me, and when I used it for 2 turns.
Yeah.
And then it's on the board for 2 turns. It's fine even as a late game card, and it's not good. I think did we raise it to a 36? Like, it's still bad. It's still definitely a bad card, and we don't recommend people drafting it. But it's not an unplayable card.
No,
like
no.
We had it as an actual unplayable card, I think. And it's not that bad. We gave it 4 points. We may give it more. It's okay. It's a 38. It was originally a 34. And 34 is basically, literally, is an Ancient Mage. So, this is better than an Ancient Mage.
Dude, Ancient Mage, not bad. Ancient Mage is kind of similar to one of the cards we're going to be talking about in Card Good Bad.
We are going to talk about a card in Card Good Bad that is very similar to Ancient Mage.
Yep.
But yeah, so Addled Grizzly's a 38 now. It's still below an Ironforge Rifleman, but it's only 2 points below an Ironforge Rifleman now.
All right, sounds good.
All right. And then finally, this is the big one. This is one we have our eye on. And this is a Paladin common, so it gets seen more often than any of these other cards we're talking about, except like removals and like, the general categories. And it is Divine Strength, which is the 1 mana buff that is destroying the meta when it comes to the expectations of how to deal with paladins. And it is doing that, but two problems were coming out of this. One is we had to rate it a little bit below Seal of Champs and Blessing of Kings because we didn't think it was as good as those cards, but we thought it was like kind of there. It's not quite there. In a meta where everything's like a bit slower and everything's a bit bigger, it's still a 1 mana card. And it may save a minion, but it doesn't add to the minion enough for it to be on the level of Blessing of Kings and Seal of Champs.
Yeah, and we never thought it was there. Here's the thing that really puzzles me, and this is where we need to go all like Sherlock Holmes with it as well. I just don't see this card a lot.
Yeah, I don't see it anywhere.
Blessing of Kings so often. You see Seal of Champs so often, like in my runs against Paladins, right? I almost never see this card.
You see freaking cards like Warhorse Trainer and Solemn Vigil so often.
Right. Or like, I think the ratio of times that I see a Blessing of Kings to this is probably like 2 to 1. Wait. What do you mean 2 to 1? Like Blessing of
Kings. You see a 2 to 1? I see like 8 to 1.
Okay, all right. Maybe no. I mean, I just don't know, like, how this is happening. Like, I just don't see.
I don't know. It's being taken less than cards that are a lot worse than it.
Yes.
And it's not like it's just stuck in people's hands and they don't use it. I don't see them using it inefficiently either. They just don't play it because they don't have it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what people are doing with it. I've used it a couple of times. It's always been good. It hasn't been the power level of Blessing of Kings or Seal of Champs, so we moved it down 4. I'd still take it over a Yeti any day because it's a card that changes the game, unlike a Yeti. And any card that changes the game with very little requirements kind of takes place over a Yeti.
Right.
But I don't know. I'm watching the card. I could move down a bit more, but no more than 4 more points at most, I want to say. It's just about the card advantage right now, and it's not giving as much card advantage as a card at that position. I think should.
That's fair. I just want to talk about one of your comments. Like, when you say that I definitely pick it over a Yeti now, it's funny, right? Like, that comment used to hold a lot more weight. And it still holds some weight, but for the listeners out there, sort of like, when you say now, it's like I pick it over a Yeti, it's like over the years, it's like, oh yeah, I'd buy that for $10, right? Yeah. But then the value of $10 just keeps on going down. So sorry, Yeti, you're like 2016 $10, not like 1950s $10. I can buy like a house.
Yetis used to be taking over everything but like the most premium of removals that classes had.
And now it's just like, I mean,
because that's how you won games before, right? When everything was very predictable and there wasn't anything to like screw you up, your Yeti was good. Now there's a lot more crap that can happen to you.
It's like, how far is Abusive Sergeant from a Yeti? Not that far. Not that far at all.
Yeah. It's because Abusive Sergeant lets you do crazy stuff.
It does.
And Yeti doesn't.
Nope.
All right, so that's Divine Strength. I would say of these cards, the one I'm keeping the eye on the most is Divine Strength. But generally, it's like that's all. we literally looked at every single common and rare card and epic cards for neutrals, and just couldn't come up with anything. Like every card we looked at, we're like, yep, that's where it is. I've seen it. I've played with it, or all that, and this is pretty much where it is. So we're good. We'll do another tier list update in a couple weeks, but I think we're pretty much there. Some of the epics may move, some of the legendaries may move, depending. But as far as commons and rares go, I think it's pretty settled within a 4-point range at this point. It would be truly shocking to me if something moved more than that. And one more thing we did is we moved Mage Secrets. The 2 trading ones, Duplicate and Effigy, we moved them up 4 points each.
They have gotten much more powerful.
They have. Just because it's, the meta, right? Like, you want the actual additional cards, and everyone's going to trade into you, so you are going to get those additional cards and additional, I guess FG puts a thing on the board. Whereas before, they may really just go face.
Yep. And we've seen it sort of, screw over people many times, right? It's like they put down something big, and are you not going to remove it? Are you just going to let him flame strike and hit you in the face with that, like Ethereal Conjurer, or do you remove it and give him more Ethereal Conjurers? It's a pretty tough choice.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay, so that's kind of the tier list update. I would consider this one, the one we just did, probably our like big tier list update. It doesn't feel big because not a lot of things moved a lot, but it's pretty accurate at this point, I think. I just did the math on this before the podcast because I wanted to like throw a stat out there, and using the top 4 classes, which we'll talk about, but it's mage, rogue, shaman, and paladin. I'm averaging 10.2 wins per run, and almost 60% of my runs have gone 12 wins in OG.
It's pretty good.
Like, it's a meta I'm very comfortable with. Let's put it that way. Like, I know what works in the meta, and if I get a deck that's like above average, I'm just empirically I'm doing pretty well with it. So this is where we're at for that. Like, I was doing the stats and I was like, ooh, Warlock, I'm averaging 7.5. And then I thought about it some more. I'm like, I shouldn't include that in my stats. That actually drags down my stats by 0.5.
I know. It's all right.
First world problems.
Yeah, ADWCTA problems. And I mean, it's pretty similar to me,
Like, right.
Yeah, pretty similar. Okay,
we won't talk about your stats. We'll just assume that we have about the same stats.
I mean,
in OG.
That's obvious. So obvious.
All right. Okay. Let's move on from the tier list update into question from the GOAT. Today we actually remember our patrons, unlike last time. And so question from the GOAT is brought to you by our patrons. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. We don't have any sponsors yet, although that may be changing soon. And so the patrons are really our only sponsors. And 4P, Burger 1996, CapsizedGames, HT Rajan, Ingo, Michael S, Paul H, Talon, and Ughbog. Thank you guys so much. You guys are what keeps everything going and keeps our dreams of becoming pro gamers someday alive.
Yeah.
So what's the question from the GOAT?
All right. So in honor of our new game that's coming out, Overwatch, basically.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, we're no longer. I forgot. We've just talked so much about Hearthstone. I just forgot that we're no longer doing Hearthstone.
A little bit too much about Hearthstone, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But anyways, the question from the GOAT this week actually comes from one of our mods, Cass. Thank you so much for this question. Basically, okay. If you were to pick, what Hearthstone character do you think I resemble or embody the most? And I will answer the same thing for you. So it could be, some sort of actual, appearance or physical trait, or it could just be sort of the spirit of the character.
Oh, I didn't even think about physical traits. I heard the question.
Well, I mean,
ooh,
hopefully,
which one looks like Merps?
Hopefully, not like I don't look like a cybernetic monk. Although, you know what?
Genji. Okay.
Who doesn't want to be Genji, man?
It's true.
He's pretty.
He is really badass.
Awesome.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Like, this is a really hard question to ask. Like, Overwatch characters all have really distinctive like backstories and really distinctive characteristics, and none of them are even remotely close to being normal people. Not that you're a normal person or that I'm a normal person, but weird people are all weird in different ways. Like, if they don't fit into an archetype and we don't fit into an archetype, then that doesn't help.
Go on.
Okay. I do think you kind of look like Torbjorn, though.
Torbjorn? Yeah. Excellent. I
like it. I do think you definitely resemble
have you guys seen Torbjorn's arms? Holy.
Yeah.
Dude. All right. I will take that.
I'll go with that. Although you definitely can't build turrets. You're really crappy with technology.
No,
So his
definitely not.
kit is probably not the same.
Well, my turret would probably be my chinchilla cage that I would wheel around and strategically place. I do push that 2 places. So for you, I would say you would most like you'd be closest to Symmetra. Okay.
Well, that's convenient.
It is very
It's gonna be one of my mains.
So number one, not that you look exactly
Really?
like
I think I look
her.
kind of like Symmetra.
I mean, if you blur your vision a little bit, sure.
Yeah,
But
I
number
could pull
one,
it off.
Symmetra does not wear any pants. She wears, something, I don't know, that's not pants. Like, you do not like wearing pants.
Okay,
right?
fair enough. Fair enough.
That's very fair. Number two, Symmetra's whole theme revolves around like careful planning, right? And you are
That's
a
true.
big planner, and like it's like you're all about like the planning, the setting up, and the teleporting to make things more efficient. You are about efficiency.
Definitely.
My
Although her
answer,
teleporter is so crappy, it's like limited use. Like,
right?
it gets destroyed.
But
I
by
could do better.
itself, the character is sort of like it's all about the planning, right? Like the character itself is sort of like fragile and weak. There's no easy way to put this, is there?
I'm gonna trail off here.
Okay, excellent. Yes, as will I.
Okay, that makes sense. I feel a kinship with Symmetra. That's why she's gonna be one of my mains. Because if you don't know her backstory, she like works for Evil Corporation, but she has like a bit more noble goals. But who knows? But it's all about like creating order. And there's like the whole like gray area is whether you care about what the people like, if people actually want it or not, to like do good regardless of whether people like, that's what evil villains do, right? But that's also generally what anyone who brings like large change in the world also does. They just like do it in a way that people happen to like. So I like the gray area in her character.
Excellent.
But yeah, you're right. She's also completely useless without a team and without the planning part. Lot of setup. Okay. Let's move back into Hearth.
It's called
Hearthstone.
So yes, let's move back into Wizard Poker and into Card Good Bad, where we tell you that we are not talking about Overwatch right now, unfortunately. So this week in Card Good Bad.
Oh man, Overwatch card game. Athena, man. Heroes of Overwatch.
Sure. All right, we're going to be talking about Evolved Kobold this week. And the part of the reason that we want to talk about this is because we've actually played with this card recently.
Yes, we have.
To great effect. And okay, for those of you who don't know, Evolved Kobold is a neutral common card, 4 mana for 2/2 and spell damage +2. So it is basically just you're paying 2 mana for +1 spell damage on Kobold Geomancer,
which is a wonderful card, like top tier, right?
Super duper top tier. So okay, you might be thinking right now, Merps, you're gonna say that in this card good bad, this card is bad, and you're right. But let's explore a little bit, because it's not just about card good bad, right? There's the gray areas as we've transitioned from Symmetra to card good bad. So here's the thing. I think in previous metas, Evolved Kobold with its +2 spell damage would have been like almost completely useless, right? There's no way you can really get away with anti-tempoing yourself by essentially 5 stat points. 5 stat points just for a spell power. But now, look, if you're able to get some spells along with it, which is already sort of hard, right? But if you do have those, the game has slowed down to a point where you can actually wait for like that turn 8 or turn 7.
We did that a lot in that run.
Exactly. Evolve Kobold and then Phantom Knives, right?
Yep.
Evolve
that
Kobold.
Was the combo. We got 2 Phantom Knives. One specifically drafted for the Evolve Kobold.
Exactly. And then it's Evolve Kobold, Shadow Strike for 7 damage, which actually matters now because there's stuff like Bog Creeper and whatever.
Eviscerate the face, all the good stuff. The best part is when you do your thing with the Evolve Kobold and it stays around on the board because you just did a massive like board flipping kind of deal, and the Evolved Kobold needs to be removed, and your opponent needs 2 damage to remove the Evolved Kobold, and they no longer have 2 damage in this meta.
2 damage is very hard to find. So if you think about it in those situations, kind of what is Evolved Kobold analogous to on the turn in which you play it? It's kind of like a Stormwind. What was it?
Champion?
Stormwind Knight, right? It's kind of like a Stormwind Knight in a way in which you deal 2 damage, and then on that turn that you play it. But then if you are able to keep it alive for another turn, then that's just sort of bonus, right? Now you suffer sort of the disability from the fact that you can't actually play it on turn 4. You have to combo it out with something. But like I said, if you have those spells, you're getting that sort of extra value from it when you've already quote played the Stormwind Knight.
I think that's thinking a little too small, because you're thinking
Okay.
as if you're just getting like a bonus target here. When with the Evolved Kobold, you can really get 3-4 targets, right?
You could.
That's what the Phantom Knives is for. That's what some of the other good cards that it combos with is for. Just, you know, the swipe is the obvious target, but we weren't playing Druid. Like it has an even bigger, like a much bigger upside, not just on turn 4. So I don't know that I'm going all the way with the Stormwind Knight analogy, but you could, like, at the basics, right? If you combo it with 1 card and you don't wait for a perfect situation, that's kind of the effect. But what you're trying to get is much more than that.
Right. I mean, you're trying to get much more, but as we've talked about, so in our game in which we used it, that's a little bit unlike the normal situation because we actually had 2 Fan of Knives.
But like, you wouldn't do it if you didn't.
I think you would still do it if the choice were, you know, sort of iffy, but you still had, because single target removal is still fair, not easy to get, but like that's sort of, you know.
And this does boost its damage in a way that matters, right?
Exactly.
Like we saw that even with Shadow Strike, 5 damage, pretty good. Getting it to 7 actually did matter.
Right. But AoEs are at the rarest, right? Like we have not seen a AoE in the longest time. So you're stuck with sort of like all of the classic AoEs, and you have, you know, some tricky sort of AoEs, but not actually impacted by spell damage, right? So the spell damage ones are like, it's as if you know, we had this sort of like plentiful amount, and then we've just had this drought since classic. Right? We've just had this drought since classic, so now we're still left with just the stuff we've had since classic, and you know, it's nice to say that you want more out of this Evolved Kobold, but I think the analogy I made is sort of like, look, let's be realistic here. You're gonna get those small removals or large removals or basic removals that are single target, right? But AoE is just so rare now, and for some classes, just like impossible to get even. So.
I mean, I don't know what Blizzard's going to do about the AoE thing. I really think they do need to increase the offering odds for AoE spells, and to do that by just increasing offering rates for Classic or for Basic, whichever one, right? Just get those Flame Strikes back. I've been calling for more Flame Strikes since the Lightforge started. I think if you go back to like the very first Lightforge episode when we were talking about the Mage and why it's the best class at the time, it's just me talking about how we need more Flame Strikes and how I was afraid that Flame Strikes are going away. A highly unpopular opinion at the time. I think it's getting a little more traction now that people are all seeing the effect. But still not a popular opinion. I guess no one likes getting Flame Strike except for me.
You just love it. It's it just makes your week.
This is what happens, right? Like, you get Flame Strike and you just win. Like, it's about winning, right? You can get the play of the game, take out 4 of my minions in 1 turn, and I just set up again and I get the payload to the point. And that's what matters at the end. That's what matters at the end.
Like it.
So that's Evolved Kobold. It's like in the proper deck, it's good, and I think the point that Merps and I are trying to make is that it doesn't have to be like the perfect deck, right? You don't have to have like 3 swipes and a bunch of
You're never
rats.
getting the perfect deck.
I mean, you may.
It's just not going to happen.
We've been on the receiving end of enough of those to know that they do exist and they are out there.
You have been on the receiving end of those.
Fine. But even on slightly less perfect decks, it's still a playable card. It's a draftable card. It's not a good card. Don't go taking it over like a Raptor or anything. But like, if push comes to shove, and you're debating between a card you know will be useless in your deck and a card, or like one that just really doesn't fit. Like if you have a slow deck and you're debating between it and a Murloc Raider, and you have a bunch of spells that may or may not be able to use Evolved Kobold, it may not be that bad because a Murloc Raider is not going to fit your slow deck. Right?
Yep.
Regardless of what it's doing. So just keep an open mind with Evolved Kobold is kind of what we're saying.
All right.
Deep fried meta time. And this deep fried meta is going to go right in with the class talk because our deep fried meta topic for today, deep fried meta, where we deep fry the meta, is priest and hunter and a tiny bit of shaman. It is about what the worst class in OG is. Because we talk a lot about the best classes, but actually,
let's allay their fears and say when we talk about shaman, we're not talking about it as the worst class.
Oh yeah, we're talking about it as one of the worst classes from before OG.
Yes. Then this is to prevent people who are just like, what are these guys talking about? Like they obviously know nothing, and you still might think that, but hopefully not about the shaman thing. So proceed.
Okay, so this is kind of where there are three classes, right? You have a hunter, you have a priest, and you have a shaman. And they walk into a bar in the League of Explorers. And they all suck and get promptly pummeled by all the other classes. So the shaman goes out and gets a huge bodyguard of Flame Wreath. And the shaman goes out and gets a very nice removal, small removal for him to work with. And also all the other cards with Evolve and all the other stuff. And so the shaman comes back, very buffed up, steps into the bar again, and he now holds his own. The priest comes back with nothing. With Darkshire, not Darkshire, what do you call that card? I can never remember OG cards, like the names.
What? Darkshire Alchemist?
Oh, it is Darkshire, I got it right. So the priest comes back with Darkshire Alchemist, which is fine, but in order to use this card, he already has to have his enemy pinned down. And at that point, the priest is the kind of person who already won the fight to begin with. So it's a good card, but it's not all that useful. And then Tentacles, once again, right? Like, it's just not a very good card. Its precondition is also that in the late game, you have a card standing on the board. At that point, you've already won. His problem, and his weakness, was never that he had trouble finishing people when he has them pinned down. His problem was that he was really slow and he was dead before he got a move off. So he's not doing too well. And then the hunter comes back with like literally nothing, right? With a bunch of very normal stuff, like bringing knives to gunfights. And the meta had changed so that knives are even worse than they were before in gunfights, because now people all have knife deflecting body armor. This analogy got off at a certain point, and it's not going to recover.
There's no punchline that could look. Even if I thought there was going to be a punchline, nothing could recover it at this point.
There was it's not a joke. There was no punchline. It was just an analogy so that people understood these three characters and the different directions they're heading.
Like a priest, a shaman, and a hunter walk into a bar and not have people think that it's going to have a punchline.
I guess I just wanted to disappoint people. That was the punchline.
Right?
Funny, we're disappointed. Okay, but the idea is that's the situation in which these classes find themselves. And I predicted that the priest was going to end up in a better position than the hunter. Not necessarily because it got better cards. I think the priest got like one card that's probably better, and then one card that's definitely worse, and the hunter got a bunch of cards that were in the middle-ish, so that probably washes out. But more, and the hunter I think even got better cards overall, right? Like, but I think the meta had changed so much that it is so much in a way that's unfavorable to the hunter, and so much in the way that is favorable to the priest, that it would actually make the priest look good compared to the hunter.
So this is where I say, okay, I'm gonna stick up for the hunter a little bit. Now, I don't think it's denied. Like, Hunter and Priest are definitely like the two worst, right? And now
Mm-hmm.
they're just jockeying for position here um, about who is the worst. Here's the thing I've noticed between like playing Hunter and Priest. Priest is definitely easier to play, and
Oh yeah, by far.
by far
It's the
it's
easiest class to play.
yeah. I mean, and there's a difference between easiest to play and sort of how good it is, right? Like
Yeah, it's easy to play it at its optimal level of bad.
like Paladin is easy, much easier to play than Rogue, and Paladin is like pretty good still, although
Mm-hmm.
step below the Rogue. Priest is also very easy to play, but it's steps below the Paladin. So in terms of ease of play, we see it's not the same as power in the arena, but Hunter is really hard to play in the arena because um, all of your decisions are magnified. All of your trades are magnified. You are never winning the value game. And by never, I say like probably 95% of the time. You can have that rare, like really super value oriented hunter deck. But those are really tough to draft because those require a lot of cards that are not giving bonus, that are not from this expansion. So in order to succeed as a hunter, you need to calculate your percentages many turns in advance. Calculate the percentage that you're going to get punished for not making this trade, calculate sort of how much you can risk actually trading into something and
Mm-hmm.
not getting that face damage.
And it's
And
all one turn, right? You miss
it,
one turn up, you're dead.
you miss
Period.
one turn. And how many games have you, seen either when you're the hunter or you're getting faced down by a hunter where just that one attack on turn 3 would have mattered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so many games are decided on, on turn 3, whether or not sort of on turn 7 or turn 8 you're going to have that lethal push. So it's really punishing. And for Priest, sort of like it's not as punishing because the face calculation is just not there, right? And if the face calculation is not there and you just have to focus on, all right, let's trade, let's get on the board, it's so much easier because now you're not just, you don't have to plan like 5 turns in advance. You're just like, I need to plan for next turn so I can valence this.
Okay. So getting aside which is easier to play, which is better if played optimally
Better if played optimally,
in this meta, in the OG meta.
I think Hunter, because I
You're
think
still going with Hunter? Oh
because I
man.
think they still have more choices at the beginning of the game.
Ah,
Yes. They
I.
still have more choices at the beginning of the game, which I
Yeah,
think
but
is
they don't
very
matter.
significant.
But they don't matter.
They do matter. You just have to figure out when it matters,
Oh,
which
that
is really
faith,
tough.
that
Really, really
faith,
tough.
that faith that you do have control over the situation when the whole meta has swung to a point in which it doesn't matter which knife you pick, they still have the body armor. You're not getting through.
Can we get past this really long analogy that you've like failed?
The analogy is fine. The only failure is that there was an expectation, apparently, of a punchline, and it wasn't a joke.
Well, no,
The
no.
analogy
I just
itself
don't see how it's
holds.
appropriate as well. Like, why the bar in that? Like, why did you have to do the whole bar thing? Like, what did the
I
bar
wanted to
analogy
paint a
bring?
picture with a setting.
Well, why the bar? Why'd you pick that one?
There's no reason. It was just in my head. The main point is that you're still bringing a knife to a gunfight, and the rules have changed so the knives are less good. And so yes, the hunter got a bunch more knives from which to pick from in the early game, but it didn't get anything that actually matters.
The
And so
story adds nothing. I don't. I'm just leaving very confused.
I mean, I understand you're leaving confused because you still think Hunter is better than Priest, and
Oh my
that's
God.
evidence of the confusion, right? Priest in this meta gets the advantage of being able to be on the board because everyone's being slow, right? Like why one of the reasons why Shaman is so good is not just because they got like all these good cards, it's because they can totem now without fear. Their totems aren't getting cleared. Your opponent isn't spreading out on the board with a bunch of little minions, killing all your totems. They have like mid-sized minions and big minions, and if you just like drop 2 minions and a totem, they're not clearing it. You just have stuff on the board. And when you have more and more stuff on the board as the shaman, you can use your stuff to do things. That's how the shaman works, right? That's why I say all totems are the same. They're not really the same, but the important part is that they're just something on the board that you can do stuff with later. Now, with the priest, it's kind of the same thing. You're not putting a lot of stuff on the board and waiting for it to live. You just need one medium-sized thing to live, and you're fine. Or, if you have Valens or Power with Tentacles, all you need is one small thing left on the board, and you're fine. And you can just achieve that with a much higher consistency than you could before, just playing the odds. I do agree. It's a very low skill cap. It's kind of like, is my opponent planning for what I'm going to do well? It's not, am I planning for what I'm going to do well, right? Like, my plans are easy. It's transparent. You know what I'm going to try to do as the priest. This is the arena. I am not holding a bunch of light bombs. And if I am, you will lose and you will not complain too much about it. So this is... that's the meta considerations that I'm thinking of that works in Priest's favor. And on the Hunter side, right, you just have all these taunts, and they're early and they're mid-range and they're late, and they stop you. So you need, even if you get a very kind of like smorky kind of deck, you're running a high degree of risk that you will get stopped no matter what. And if you can't draft a very high deck with good reach, then you're really screwed, right? And a lot of what Hunter used to rely on to get reach isn't just their hero power, it's also being able to charge out stuff without a board, right? Or like stealth stuff without a board. And that all those stuff is so much worse. The only thing that didn't change is the hero power. That's the only thing that didn't change with the Hunter. Everything else got worse.
Right, that didn't change. And look, there is Squirming Tentacles. There's these sort of mid-game, and there's Cyclotron as well. But that's balanced out by sort of the fact that some people just miss their 2-drop and their 3-drop, right? Like they just like miss a lot. So the sort of disadvantage in these taunts is kind of made up by the fact that you're more likely to speed ahead in the early game, right? Like, and I'll be honest,
you can't do anything with it, right? Like, if you're a rogue and you speed ahead in the early game, you can do stuff with it because you have your saps, you have your assassinates, you have your just all sorts of like ways to like deal with your opponent's board. If you're like a warlock and you get ahead on the board, you have your card advantage coming in with your hero power. And this is one of the problems too with Warrior, and Warrior even does better with it than Hunter does. But it's still that they get stopped, and Warrior has insane cards.
They get stopped, and look, like I said, we're not talking about them having success here, right? Like, we're talking about the 2 bottom classes.
Yeah.
So you saying like, well, it doesn't work. I'm like, well, it's obvious it doesn't work. That's what we're talking about as well.
Okay, fine, but it works worse than the Priest game plan, I think.
I don't think so, because I think it's so awkward as a Priest in terms of because you can't exactly play reactively because you have buffs, right? Like, you're not a pure control class.
But you're not a control class at all.
No.
But you're just a slow class.
You're a slow class.
You're a slow snowball class. But in this meta, you can snowball while being slow. This was the problem in prior metas. You can never snowball when being slow.
You could snowball, but at the same time, like, you know how we talked about the inflexibility of Paladin, right? And we talked about sort of like, how they're predictable. Priests are even more like Paladins have, if anything, gained flexibility, right, throughout the expansions.
Yes.
Priests have not. Like, if anything, they've become even more rigid, especially in comparison to all the other classes.
Yes, totally agree.
So I think that is part of the reason why they're so weak, right? Like, the meta has shifted to their favor in terms of speed, but the inflexibility, like, they are just like...
They were never flexible. That was kind of the whole problem. You're like, oh, you suck at this, but now you suck even more at this.
That inflexible...
I don't think it makes that big of a difference.
I think it's a huge knock on them.
Nah, I think you just think you have more control over how things go than you actually do. Like, I think the illusion of choice that you have with which knife you're getting to pick is
oh my God, the
is
knives.
sending you off the wrong path in terms of how much impact those knives will actually have against what you're facing. Whereas as the priest, you just kind of get one thing, but if that thing works, it works. Whereas the knives really don't have much of a chance.
I don't know. Okay, this knives analogy, it's too much, man. It's way too much.
All right, so we'll end on that note, and we'll go play some Priest and see how well we do. I've actually, I think I've averaged definitely more than 7 wins per run with Priest. I can't say the same for Hunter. I don't know how you've been with these two classes. You've actually played probably both of these classes more than me. Like, you play these classes a lot off stream.
I do
as well, but like, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting lucky with Priest, but I've definitely been able to do a lot of things as Priest that before I would have just been overrun. Like, I'm in situations that I'm like, well, I'm gonna lose now. And then like half the time, 2/3 of the time, I just don't lose because they never do anything to threaten me, and I end up actually getting my big stuff out or doing like a, even like a tempo enforcer combo or something, right? It's not really a combo. It's like I'm putting out a minion with tempo enforcer, giving it extra health, and my opponent then can't deal with it for some reason. Like, you're talking about the inflexibility of the priest being able to do stuff. Everyone's getting less flexible because everything's getting diluted. And so people are getting less and less able to repeatedly keep the priest off the board. And that's a problem because priest is the class that does the best when it is on the board. It's just also the class with the least tools to get on the board. So I don't know. We'll end this discussion at some point. By the end of the OG meta, I still want to convince you that priest is actually in a better spot than hunter.
We will see.
If we can even argue about this, then it's fine, right? Like in one of the questions that I was asked when I was on the Golden Wisp podcast, which you should definitely check out that interview, is what's the next charge that you're leading, right? Like after Arena Warriors matters and its success, what's next for you? And I was like, I don't want to lead any charges, right? Like I didn't want to lead that charge. We were just in the perfect position to do it. And Blizzard had gone like really too far by that point. But there's nothing like that right now. Like we can sit here and be like, yeah, priest sucks, hunter sucks, but they're not that bad. They're very much in the meta. Like I'm averaging more than 7 wins with priest. I'm not the only one. Like people do fine with priest. Some people do fine with hunter also. I think Shady's still doing incredible with hunter as usual. Like these are doable classes. This isn't like TGT Warrior where no one was doing 7 wins. Like no one was doing close to that. Well, I guess some people may have been close to it.
There was a point where Warrior wasn't a class.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like it doesn't matter what you do, how good you are. The odds are going to get you. Your bad cards are going to get you. And here, everything's kind of, I wouldn't say it's perfectly balanced, but Blizzard's been lifting classes up, right? Like Warlock, then Warrior, now Shaman, and whatever the next expansion is, I'll bet anything, either Priest or Hunter is going to get lifted up. But they haven't left these two classes totally in the dust. Although I'm still with my Hunter being worse, and I guess you're still with your Priest being worse. Okay, that's it from us for this week. Next week, we will not be around anymore because we will have turned into a Overwatch stream. But no, we will be around. We will always be around when it comes to Hearthstone Arena. That will never change. In it for the long haul. But if you are interested in Overwatch and you like us, and you want to watch us, we play like supports and tanks mostly. But we're going to try to get very competitive with it once they get ranked mode out. It's still twitch.tv/grinandgo. It's the same channel. And for the Overwatch launch, like first 3 days, we'll be definitely streaming Overwatch the entire time. So come check us out and say hi. We're gonna try, right? Like the ultimate experiment of two people who have very limited first-person shooter skills, me especially, and we're gonna try to see if we can be fairly competitive with it by playing classes that don't involve as much actual first-person skills and relying on our good communication, teamwork, strategy, and our teammates who do have good first-person shooter skills.
Yes, looking forward to it. All right, so I guess that's it for this week. Wrapping up the final Lightforge before the biggest event of our gaming lives.
Tomorrow.
Let's do it. All right.
See you guys. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Bye.